At my daughter's wedding, everything changed in a single heartbeat. The ballroom was filled with guests, laughing glasses, clinking music, swelling softly in the background. I moved to sit, trying to blend into the celebration, when her fiancé, with a smirk that cut deeper than any knife, pulled out a chair from under me. I collapsed to the floor, my body hitting the polished marble amid the gasps and laughter of the guests. "Your place is on the floor," he said, mocking me, his words echoing through the room, humiliating me in front of everyone I had loved, everyone I had trusted. For a moment, the world stopped. My face burned. My hands trembled, and I felt every eye on me like 1,000 needles. Then, out of the silence, something unexpected happened. The groom's father, tall, distinguished, his eyes widened in recognition, stood up. He took a step toward me, his voice low, almost shaking with surprise, whispering, "Sir, is that you?" The words hit me like a thunderclap. Time paused. The humiliation, the laughter, the coldness in the fiancé's eyes. Everything shifted in that moment. It was a fragile, sacred pause, a pivot on which the rest of my life hung. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. Later, the screech of brakes tore through the winter evening. Tires skidded against the asphalt, a metal-on-metal cry that vibrated through the bones. A car door slammed with enough force to shake the garage windows. My wrench slipped from my hand. Oil sprang across the concrete floor in tiny glittering droplets. Vivian burst through the side door, her face lit with a light that could have burned the cold away. "Dad, you won't believe." She stopped mid-sentence, bouncing on her toes just like she did when she was 7, carrying a secret that seemed too big for her chest. I wiped my hands on the oil-stained rag, squinting against the harsh fluorescent light that hung over the garage, like a judgmental eye. The vintage Harley I had been rebuilding sat half-assembled, its engine parts scattered across the workbench, like mechanical confetti gleaming in the cold winter air that seeped through the door gaps. The smell of motor oil mixed with the crisp January night, a sharp scent that pulled me back to 1,000 nights spent in this garage. "What's got you so worked up, sweetheart?" I asked, straightening my back, feeling the ache that always followed hours bent over the engine. Her eyes sparkled brighter than the engagement rings she held. The diamond was bigger, brighter, and more expensive than anything I could have afforded on a mechanic's salary. She thrust her phone toward me, trembling with excitement. Jasper proposed. "Look, Dad. Look at this video." I set down the rag and took her phone, my calloused fingers leaving smudges on the screen. The video showed a restaurant I could never have entered, crystal chandeliers hung over white tablecloths, servers in pressed uniforms moving silently, gracefully. Jasper knelt beside a table, his expensive suit, perfectly tailored, a Rolex glinting on his wrist, presenting the ring box with the calm assurance of a man who believed he owned the world. "We're getting married in April," his voice said, smooth, confident, almost too perfect. Vivian rushed on her words, tumbling over each other like a rapid river. "You'll be so happy for me, Dad. He's everything I've dreamed of." But I watched closely, noticing subtle movements that spoke volumes. How Jasper barely looked at the young waitress, refilling their water glasses. How his gesture was dismissive, almost irritated. In the background, his voice carried condescending, measured, though I couldn't make out the words. "Of course I'm happy for you, princess," I said, forcing a smile. I handed back the phone. "When do I get to meet his parents?" Vivian's nervous laughter reverberated off the garage walls. "Oh, they're traveling in Europe for 2 months, but they'll be back just before the wedding. Jasper says we don't need to wait for them to plan everything." Outside, traffic hummed along the Brooklyn street, a constant, distant pulse. Neighbors called goodnight to each other, their voices carried on the cold air like ghosts. I picked up another wrench, needing the weight in my hands. Something solid amid the tension. "That's quite a timeline," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "April's not very far away." "I know," she spun around, arms outstretched as if to embrace the whole world. "Jasper says when you know, you know. He doesn't believe in wasting time with long engagements." The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the workbench, across every tool and engine part, every memory I had of teaching her to ride, her first bike in this garage. I glanced at the video one more time. Jasper's expression flickered in a way that made my chest tighten, a flash of something I didn't like hidden behind the perfect smile. "Show me that ring again," I said, stepping closer. She extended her hand and I examined the diamond carefully. Flawless, expensive, designed to impress rather than express love. The setting was modern cold sterile, a stark contrast to the warmth of the simple band I had given her mother 28 years ago. "It's beautiful, Vivian. Really beautiful, isn't it? He has amazing taste." She pulled back her hand, watching how the stone caught the light, how it glimmered dazzling and untouchable. "He wants to take you to dinner tomorrow night so you two can get to know each other properly." She said, her voice bright, excited, yet somewhere beneath it, I felt a shadow. I stood there surrounded by the familiar chaos of my garage, the cold metal, the sharp smell of oil, the echoing laughter of my daughter, and I knew that life had a way of throwing moments at us. Moments that could break us, moments that could force us to see clearly, moments that could change everything. And somewhere far away in that perfect restaurant, Jasper smiled, oblivious to the storm gathering. Quietly behind my eyes, I nodded, my mind already racing. The suit hung in my closet, crisp and dark, waiting for the occasion Jasper had in mind. Would it be enough, suitable enough? The oil stain on my work shirt seemed suddenly darker, more pronounced under the harsh fluorescent garage lights. "I'd like that," I said, but a cold unease crawled up my spine, like fingers made of ice. "Just the three of us?" I asked, my voice trying to hide the tremor. "Yes. His parents won't be back until right before the wedding. But that's perfect. Actually, you'll have his full attention." Vivian kissed my cheek, a gentle, fleeting gesture, leaving behind the lingering scent of her perfume, mixed with the winter air still clinging to her coat. She turned toward the door, connecting the garage to the house, paused and looked back at me. "Dad," she said, her eyes bright. "You're going to love him once you really get to know him. I promise." The door clicked shut behind her, and suddenly I was alone. Alone with the half-assembled Harley, with the scattered engine parts, with the echo of her words hanging in the air. I picked up the wrench again, but my hands shook slightly. In my mind, the video played once more. Jasper's dismissive gesture, the rushed timeline, the absent parents. I closed the garage door, slowly stepping into the house. But the cold feeling in my chest had nothing to do with the January night. 2 hours later, I sat at the desk in my small home office, staring at the computer that seemed to take forever to boot up. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the processor and my own shallow breathing. A photograph of Maria smiled at me from its place beside the monitor. Her wedding dress was white as fresh snow, her eyes bright with the same uncontainable joy I had seen in Vivian tonight. I touched the gold chain around my neck, where my wedding ring hung hidden beneath my shirt. The metal was warm from my body, a constant reminder of promises made and kept. "I need to know who this boy is." "Maria," I whispered, my voice low. Almost a prayer. "Help me protect our girl." Facebook loaded slowly on the old computer. I found Jasper's profile easily enough. Jasper Hale, financial analyst at Morrison & Associates. His profile picture showed him leaning against a red Ferrari, sunglasses reflecting the camera flash. His smile sharp as a knife edge. My stomach tightened as I scrolled through post after post. Finally found someone who appreciates the finer things. Moving Up posted 3 days ago with a photo of an expensive restaurant bill. Old generation just doesn't understand modern success. Still living in the past while we're building the future. Another post from last week. Dozens of likes from friends whose profiles reflected the same arrogance, the same obsession with status. In the comments section of a friend's promotion announcement at a construction company, Jasper wrote, "Congrats, I guess. Some people are content with ordinary lives, not me. Ambition matters." Photo after photo followed. Luxury cars, expensive watches, exclusive restaurants. But it wasn't the money that bothered me. It was the attitude, the contempt, the way he looked down on people who worked with their hands, who built things, who served others. One post from December stood out, upgrading my lifestyle. One smart choice at a time. Sometimes you have to leave your past behind to step into your future. Comments overflowed with encouragement from friends who shared his values. One asked about his new girl, and Jasper replied, "She's perfect, sweet, trusting, and her father's. Exactly the kind of simple man who won't complicate things." Simple man. The words hit me like a physical blow. I leaned back in the chair, the old springs creaking under my weight. The room felt smaller, suddenly claustrophobic. I looked around. Family photos covered the walls. Vivian's graduation, her first apartment birthday parties where she blew out candles while I cheered from behind the camera. In every frame. It was just the two of us. No extended family, no safety net beyond what I could provide with my own two hands. The military commendations hung in a simple frame near the bookshelf. Dusty, rarely looked at anymore. That part of my life felt distant, belonging to someone else. And yet, in every photo, every medal, every memory, there was one unchanging truth. I had raised my daughter to stand strong. But could I protect her from a boy who believed he was above the world? She had grown up in my fists clenched, knuckles white. The cold from the January night was nothing compared to the cold that slithered through my heart. I took a deep breath. My eyes locked on the profile picture of Jasper Hale, leaning against that red Ferrari, smiling that razor-sharp smile. I knew then that the battle was not just about money, not just about luxury. It was about values. It was about respect. It was about protecting the girl who was my everything from a man who somehow thought he knew better than I did. And as the night stretched on, I sat there alone in my small office, surrounded by memories, by evidence of a life built with my own hands, feeling the weight of the future bearing down on me. What mattered more than money, more than luxury, more than Jasper's sharp smile or expensive suits, was the promise I'd made to Maria the day Vivian was born. I would protect our daughter from anyone who might ever hurt her. That promise was older than my fears, stronger than my doubts carved into my heart with every sleepless night and every sacrifice I'd made for her. I clicked through more of Jasper's photos, one after another. Him at charity events posed to show off his expensive suit rather than the cause. Pictures from work, functions where he stood slightly apart from his colleagues. His posture suggesting he considered himself above their company, above the people who built things, who worked with their hands, who served others. In one photo from a company retreat, he had written, "Networking with the right people. It's not what you know. It's who you know and how to use them. Use them." My skin crawled. Every word felt like a warning, written across my chest. The house settled around me into the quiet of night. Familiar creaks and sighs whispering from the walls. Through the thin divider I could hear Mrs. Rodriguez next door, her evening telenovela, drifting through the winter air like a ghostly soundtrack to my thoughts. Normal sounds of a normal neighborhood where people looked out for each other, where honest work was respected. I thought about Vivian's face tonight, radiant glowing eyes bright with complete unquestioning trust. She had inherited her mother's ability to see the best in people, to believe in love, to believe that it could conquer all obstacles. That gift, that trust was one of the things I cherished most about her. And now it terrified me. My reflection stared back at me from the dark window. Gray hair, weathered face. Hands that showed decades of honest work. Everything Jasper seemed to despise about my generation. Yet those hands had held my daughter when she cried, taught her to ride her first bicycle, worked extra shifts to pay for college. They were hands that built a life, hands that loved. I closed the laptop and sat in darkness for a long moment, letting the weight of anticipation settle on my shoulders. Tomorrow night I would meet Jasper face to face. I would look him in the eye and see if the man matched the arrogance and entitlement that bled from every post, every photo. I would give him a chance to prove me wrong, but if he was what these posts suggested, if he saw my daughter as just another acquisition, another step up his social ladder, then I would need to protect her without crushing her faith in love. The photograph of Maria seemed to nod at me in the dim light from the street lamp outside. I touched the wedding ring beneath my shirt, drawing strength from the metal that had witnessed decades of devotion of promises made and kept. Tomorrow I would begin to learn what kind of man wanted to marry my daughter. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by dreams of Maria, warning me about men who saw love as a business transaction, dreams of Vivian smiling unaware, and Jasper's smug face superimposed on every celebration, every gift, every gesture. The winter sun struggled through my bedroom curtains, casting pale light across the room, where I had raised Vivian alone for 26 years. The phone rang while I spread peanut butter on toast. My breakfast routine, unchanged for decades. Vivian's voice bubbled through the speaker, full of engagement euphoria. Good morning. Did you sleep well? I couldn't sleep at all. I admitted my fingers, touching the ring beneath my shirt. Morning, sweetheart. I'm glad you're happy. I set down the knife, forcing my voice to remain steady. So about tonight. Jasper made reservations at the Golden Fork for 7:30. Do you know it? It's in Manhattan near Central Park. He says it's one of the city's hidden gems. I knew the name from newspaper reviews I'd never had reason to read. Appetizers cost more than I spent on groceries in a week. My mind flicked to the suit hanging in my closet and the thought of stepping into that world with one evening to make an impression. Sounds fancy, I said, already measuring every thread and seam in my mind. Oh, it is. Jasper has such refined taste. And Dad, his parents are still in Europe. They won't be back until just before the wedding. But that was perfect, I thought. Tonight would be about them, about Vivian and Jasper getting to know each other. 2 months in Europe, a life of casual luxury that spoke of serious money. I thought about my own vacation time, saved for years spent on long weekends, fixing the house or visiting historical sites with Vivian. When did they leave? I asked. Right after Christmas. They're doing some kind of extended art tour, Florence, Paris, Vienna. Jasper says they travel for months at a time. Isn't that romantic, I thought? Or convenient? I kept the thought to myself. Well, I'm looking forward to meeting your young man properly, I said. 7:30, you said? Yes, and Dad dressed nice. Okay. Jasper really values making a good first impression. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the evening press down on me. It was more than dinner, more than introductions. It was the moment where worlds collided, the world I built with my hands, with love, with sacrifice against the world. Jasper claimed as his playground, and tomorrow that collision would happen, face to face. After she hung up, I stood in my small kitchen, letting the silence settle around me like a heavy blanket. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting pale gold across the worn countertops and the linoleum floor that had seen decades of scratches, spills, and late-night repairs. My eyes traced the refrigerator, covered in a mosaic of Vivian's childhood artwork, elementary school drawings, crayon smudges, photos from her college graduation, small magnets holding memories of a life built on love, care and sacrifice, a life where money had never been the measure of worth. Every worn edge of the cabinets, every scuff in the wood, every place where I had chosen, function over form was exposed by the morning sun. My home had never been perfect, but it was ours, constructed through years of hard work, dedication, and quiet pride. Today, those edges seemed to mock me, remind me that tonight would be different. Tonight, the home I built would meet the world my daughter had chosen. I spent the afternoon preparing as though I were bracing for inspection. My one good suit, navy blue purchase for Vivian's college graduation, hung from the closet door. Its fabric, softened by use, slightly faded, a small tear near the pocket, meticulously mended. Would it be enough? Would it meet the unspoken standards of Jasper Hale's world? I could almost hear the tick of his wealth, his confidence, his everything that seemed to clash with the life I had lived. In the bathroom mirror, I studied my reflection with brutal honesty. 58 years old, hair more gray than brown, face marked by decades of outdoor work of weathered hands and tired eyes. Hands scarred, calloused, proof of a lifetime of honest labor. Not the soft, manicured hands of a man who made his living with spreadsheets, market analysis, and social advantage. My face told stories of sacrifice, single parenthood, midnight worries and a devotion that money could never buy. I shaved carefully with the electric razor Vivian had given me last Christmas. "It'll give you a professional look, Dad," she had said, laughing. I had accepted it, amused by her concern by the role reversal of daughter worrying about father. I felt every stroke of the razor against my skin as a reminder that tonight, every detail mattered, from my tie knot to the way I stood to the weight of my gaze. The suit fit well enough, though it felt foreign after months of work, shirts, jeans, and boots. I had kept myself in good shape, despite my age, but the formal clothing highlighted how rarely I had needed to dress up. Most of my life revolved around neighborhood barbecues, Vivian's birthday dinners, simple occasions where comfort trumped appearance. Tonight that would not be enough. Tonight appearances were a tool, precision, strategy, observation. As I adjusted my tie, I thought about the questions I needed to ask, subtle, polite, inconspicuous. How long had he known he wanted to marry Vivian? What were his long-term plans? Did he truly understand the kind of woman she was? Someone who valued loyalty, compassion, and integrity above wealth or status, and beneath the politeness, darker questions lurked. Why the rush to marry? Why were his parents conveniently absent? Did he love my daughter for who she was, or for what she represented in his ambition, his ladder, his world? My mind, trained in the military, instinctively assessed the terrain, read the enemy, identify threats, plan multiple approaches to the objective. The objective tonight was simple yet monumental. Understand what kind of man wanted to marry my daughter. My eyes fell on the photograph on my dresser. Vivian at age 10, gap-toothed and beaming, holding a fish she had caught during a camping trip upstate. She had insisted on baiting her own hook. "I can do things myself, Dad," she had said with characteristic determination. That independent spirit had carried her through college, launched her interior design career. Yet it also made her vulnerable. Vivian's trust could be misunderstood, her kindness mistaken for naivety, her loyalty exploited by those who saw life as a transaction. I grabbed my keys and wallet, each motion precise, deliberate. I checked the address Vivian had texted me, the car, the route, the timing. Every detail became part of my mental map. My heart beat with anticipation, a mix of pride, love, and an uneasy tension that coiled in my chest like a predator waiting to strike. Tonight was not just dinner. Tonight was a test, a battlefield of wits, integrity, and intuition. And as I stepped out of my small home, locking the door behind me, I carried with me the weight of 26 years of parenthood, the lessons of sacrifice, the memories of first steps and first falls, first triumphs and heartbreaks. I carried Vivian's entire life in my heart, and I would protect it no matter what I found at the Golden Fork tonight. The subway ride into Manhattan was a corridor of anticipation, the rattling rails and distant murmurs giving me time to compose myself, to steel my nerves, to prepare for the man I was about to meet. Would he be the confident, smug figure from social media, the man who smiled with sharp teeth and no warmth? Or would he surprise me, reveal a depth hidden behind polished luxury, someone worthy of my daughter's love? Outside, the January air bit at my face as I locked the front door. Mrs. Rodriguez waved from her window, her knit hat pulling her face into a warm smile. I waved back, grateful for neighbors who had watched over Vivian and me over the years. Guardians of a community where trust and hard work mattered more than money. Each step toward the subway station felt like marching toward an unseen battlefield. Alert, prepared, yet hoping for the best. Tonight I would discover whether my daughter had chosen a partner or a predator. The taxi pulled away from the curb on Fifth Avenue, leaving me standing before the Golden Fork's imposing facade. Crystal chandeliers gleamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, throwing fractals of light onto the snow-covered sidewalk. A doorman in white gloves gestured toward the entrance with practiced elegance. Every movement, a silent message of wealth and exclusivity. I adjusted my tie. One final time, feeling the weight of every dollar. This place would cost every expectation that came with it. Inside, the marble floors reflected amber lighting like liquid gold. Soft murmurs of conversation swirled around me, each threadbare note of laughter and clink of glass, a reminder that I was out of place. Here a mechanic in a world built on money and appearances. Other diners spoke in hushed tones, their clothing worth more than my monthly mortgage. The hostess, a young woman with perfect posture and a smile that didn't reach her eyes, appraised me from head to toe. Raya's party, I said, keeping my voice calm, measured. She nodded, leading me through a forest of tables where men wore watches that caught the light like tiny suns, and women draped themselves in jewelry that sparkled with every gesture. I spotted Vivian, immediately her face lighting up as she waved enthusiastically from a corner booth. Beside her sat Jasper, checking his phone with the casual indifference of a man accustomed to having others wait. Dad. Vivian stood as I approached, radiating excitement, while Jasper remained seated until the last possible moment, rising slowly as if the effort were an inconvenience. Mr. Reyes. His handshake was limp, polished, dismissive, a gesture that lasted just long enough to avoid outright rudeness. Vivian's told me so much about you. He said, his tone implying she had revealed too much too soon. Likewise, I replied, settling into the chair across from them. Congratulations on your engagement. Jasper's smile was all teeth and no warmth. Thank you. We're very excited about our future together. He signaled the waiter with an imperious gesture. Wine selection tonight will be the 2009 Bordeaux. Bottle service. No consultation, no question of preference. The waiter nodded obediently, retreating. So Mr. Reyes Jasper leaned back, fingers steepled like a man conducting an interview. Vivian tells me you work with your hands. That must be satisfying. The pause before satisfying carried volumes. I'm a mechanic, I said simply. I fix things that are broken. How refreshingly honest. He said, his laugh, sharp edge with a kind of polished cruelty. I'm in financial services myself. Portfolio management, high-stakes investments. A different world entirely, I suppose. Vivian reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Dad rebuilt his motorcycle completely from scratch. It's beautiful. A vintage Harley from the 70s. Jasper checked his Rolex ostentatiously. Dangerous hobby for someone your age, wouldn't you say? Though I suppose different generations have different ideas about appropriate risks. The wine arrived and Jasper performed an elaborate tasting ritual while the sommelier waited. He nodded approvals as if bestowing great favors, then gestured for our glasses to be filled without asking. Vivian's been telling me about your quaint neighborhood in Brooklyn. He continued, swirling his glass. So authentic, very working class. I imagine the sense of community must compensate for other limitations. What limitations? I asked before I could stop myself. Oh, nothing specific, he said, smiling. Just that once you've experienced certain standards of living, it becomes difficult to appreciate simpler pleasures. But that's generational, I think. Your generation values different things, my generation. The condescension dripped from his words like honey from a broken jar, such as I asked, voice calm but taut with tension. Traditional values, I suppose. Hard work for its own sake rather than working smart. Loyalty to outdated concepts rather than adapting to modern realities. He gestured around the restaurant. Places like this, for instance. Your generation might see it as wasteful extravagance, while we see it as investment in experiences that matter. Vivian shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her hand still resting on mine. The amber light cast long shadows across Jasper's face, sharp and controlled, reflecting the uneasy battle that had already begun between my values, my fears, and the world he represented. Jasper, Dad appreciates nice things too. My voice carried calmly across the table. But beneath the politeness beat the pulse of warning, the steel of protection I had worn for 26 years. Of course he does, Jasper interrupted smoothly, his smile too perfect, too calculated. I didn't mean to suggest otherwise. It's just different perspectives on value and success. He turned back to me, steepling his fingers like a conductor, commanding attention. Tell me, Mr. Reyes, what do you consider your greatest achievement? The question hung between us like a razor beautifully constructed. Answer with pride and he would find a way to diminish it. Answer with humility, and he would interpret it as proof of limited ambition. Raising Vivian, I said simple, truthful. Admirable, he nodded, but his eyes held calculation. Sharp as the edge of a knife. Single parenthood must have been challenging. Limited resources, I imagine. No wonder Vivian appreciates having someone who can provide properly for her future. The words hit like physical blows, each one precisely aimed each one, leaving a cold impression against my chest. I felt my jaw tighten. Vivian's face flushed red, her hands resting tentatively on the tablecloth. Jasper, please. Her voice carried a whisper of authority, but it didn't reach him. What I'm simply acknowledging your father's sacrifices. And now that I'm in the picture, those days of struggle are over. Vivian deserves the finer things in life. Don't you think, Mr. Reyes, his eyes fixed on mine? Unblinking, predatory measuring. I gripped my napkin until my knuckles went white. Around us, crystal glasses clinked against china silverware, shined under the candlelight, creating a soundtrack of wealth and privilege that suddenly felt oppressive, suffocating. The waiter approached with menus, but Jasper waved him away. Actually, I think we're ready for the check. The waiter returned with a leather folder, placing it beside Jasper's elbow. With practiced discretion, through the crystal and candlelight, I watched Jasper examine the bill with theatrical attention, eyebrows rising in mock surprise. Well now, he said, sliding the check across the white tablecloth. Toward me with deliberate slowness, I believe tradition dictates that the bride's father handles dinner. My stomach dropped. $340, more than I spent on groceries in a month. I opened my mouth. Jasper, that's not necessary nonsense, sweetheart. He waved her objection away without looking at her, eyes still locked on mine. Your father wants to show his support for our engagement. Don't you, Mr. Reyes? The silence between us stretched like a wire under extreme tension. Every breath, every flicker of candlelight amplifying it. Other diners carried on oblivious. A woman at the next table laughed bright and careless, her voice floating like music in the amber-lit atmosphere. Of course, Jasper continued, leaning back in his chair. With satisfaction, your generation probably doesn't understand modern courtesies. In my circle, this is simply how things are done. My hands trembled as I reached for my wallet. Leather worn smooth. From years of use, a working man's wallet, never intended to carry the kind of money this restaurant expected. I could feel Vivian watching, her face pale in the flickering candlelight. Dad, please. Her whisper carried hesitation and fear. I placed my credit card on the check, praying for the transaction to go through. It's fine, princess. Jasper's smile spread triumph, written across every feature. Excellent. I do appreciate a man who understands proper protocol. He checked his phone again, scrolling as if the moment of my humiliation had already been forgotten. You know, Mr. Reyes, Vivian was worried you might not approve of our relationship. I told her mature adults always find ways to get along, I said calmly, even as the word mature landed like a slap between us. The restaurant hummed with quiet prosperity, clinking silverware, whisper of designer fabrics, soft laughter of people who belonged here. I had never felt more like an outsider. I simply believe in treating people with respect. I added carefully, watching every muscle in his face for reaction. Respect. Jasper looked up from his phone. Eyebrows arched in simulated confusion. I thought I was being quite respectful. After all, I'm allowing you to maintain traditional customs. Some men in my position might insist on modern arrangements, but I understand the importance of letting older generations feel useful. The amber candlelight cast long shadows across the table, making Jasper's smile appear both brilliant and menacing. Each gesture, each word was a test, a game, and I sat there, breathing slowly, feeling the weight of years, of sacrifice, of love for my daughter, preparing for every next move in this silent, elegant battlefield. Vivian's wineglass trembled in her hand, tiny ripples catching the candlelight and scattering like liquid stars across the tablecloth. Jasper, please stop. Her voice shook, soft but firm. Stop what, darling? He replied, smoothly, eyes glinting with malicious amusement, innocence pretending to mask. Calculated cruelty. I'm simply having a conversation with your father. Unless he's uncomfortable with honest discussion about our different backgrounds. The waiter returned with my credit card and the receipt. I signed it with a hand that shook slightly, feeling the tip like a physical weight, painful yet necessary to maintain some modicum of dignity in front of the staff. $362 total, nearly a week's wages, there we are. Jasper said brightly, as if he'd just done me a favor. Nothing like a good meal to bring family together, though I suppose this is quite a step up from your usual dining experiences. Mr. Reyes, I stood slowly, the chair scraping against the marble floor in a sound that echoed sharp and unforgiving through the sudden quiet that had fallen over our table. Vivian looked up at me, her eyes wide filled with horror, understanding, and something like regret. Thank you for dinner, Jasper continued, still seated, still smiling, every word a carefully placed pinprick. I'm sure Vivian will appreciate seeing how well her two favorite men get along. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. This wasn't nervousness, social awkwardness, or miscommunication. This was deliberate character assassination performed with surgical precision in front of my daughter, designed to undermine, intimidate, and assert superiority. Dad, Vivian whispered, rising tentatively. Her engagement ring caught, the candlelight throwing sparkles across the tablecloth, like scattered stars. Small reminders of her happiness, her innocence, her trust. I looked down at Jasper, still lounging in his chair, phone in hand face, calm, perfect, untouchable. Expensive suit, perfect hair, smug expression, every detail, screaming privilege and entitlement. Vivian, I said quietly, my voice low but firm, we need to talk. I touched her elbow, gently guiding her away from the table toward a quieter alcove near the restaurant's entrance. The alcove was dimly lit, intentionally intimate, a shelter from the amber glow of crystal and marble that masked the true emotions of the night. Through the amber-tinted glass, I could see the Manhattan street beyond. Ordinary people living, ordinary lives, unaware of the small explosive drama unfolding behind the luxurious facade. Dad, Vivian started, her hands twisting together in her lap, voice hesitant. Princess, I said, keeping my tone gentle, though my chest burned with suppressed anger. I need you to really think about how he treated both of us tonight. She stared at the table between us, engagement ring, catching the soft light like a beacon. Maybe he was just nervous, she offered tentatively. First impressions are hard, and he knows how important you are to me. Was that nervousness? I whispered back, letting the words hang between us, the way he spoke about our neighborhood, the way he made me pay while acting like he was doing me a favor. Do you think that's nervousness? Her face flushed, but she still couldn't meet my eyes. He's used to a different world, Dad. Different customs. Maybe it just seemed normal to him. Vivian looked at me. Slowly, reluctantly, she raised her head. And there she was, my little girl again. The same child who used to crawl into my lap when the world felt too big, too confusing, seeking safety in my arms. A man who truly loves you, I said, voice, steady but heavy, would never deliberately humiliate your father. He wouldn't mock the neighborhood where you grew up or dismiss the work that put food on our table. But I love him, she whispered, and the words carried both plea and confusion. And he says he loves me. I believe you love him, I replied, touching her hands, covering them with mine. But honey, love isn't enough if it's not returned the same way. I've seen his type before. They start with small disrespects and build from there. Tonight was a test to see how much I'd take, how much you'd excuse, how much you'd believe it was just normal. Her eyes shimmered, filled with the tension of innocence confronting reality, the struggle between trust and warning. The alcove felt smaller, more intimate, as if the walls themselves were witnessing the battle between a father's instincts and a daughter's heart. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at our joined hands as the flickering candlelight cast long shadows across her face. Her eyes were shimmering, tears pooling at the corners, reflecting the warm amber glow of the alcove. The restaurant's crystal chandelier, beyond the glass partition glittered like distant stars. But here in our little sanctuary, time felt suspended. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible, fragile yet trembling with urgency. I saw how he looked at you. That wasn't nervousness, was it, no, sweetheart? I said, my voice low, but steady, carrying the weight of every year I'd spent protecting her. It wasn't. He's never talked to me that way. She added quickly, almost defensively, as if by insisting on his goodness, she could undo the evening's damage. He's always been sweet, attentive. I'm sure he has been. I took a deep breath, feeling the pulse in my chest, the echo of anger and worry from earlier, still thrumming through my veins. Vivian, you're beautiful, successful, kind. Everything a man like him wants to acquire. The word tasted bitter on my tongue, sharp as broken glass. But acquisition isn't love, Vivian. Love means cherishing what someone values, not dismissing it, not mocking it, not testing it like prey. Tears gathered in her eyes, trembling, uncertain. What if you're right? What if I've made a terrible mistake? Her voice quavered, and in that single heartbreaking question, I heard the weight of every fatherly fear I had carried since the day she was born. I thought of every moment I'd watched her navigate life, struggling with decisions, trying to protect herself and trust others in equal measure. I thought of all the times I'd wanted to shield her from disappointment, knowing deep down she needed to learn to grow, to make her own choices. Then you figure out what to do next. I said simply, gently, letting the words sink in. And you remember, whatever happens, you're not alone. You have people who love you for exactly who you are. People who would never ask you to be ashamed of where you come from. She wiped her eyes with the cloth napkin, leaving small dark spots on the expensive fabric, symbols of vulnerability against the opulence around us. I thought I was so smart, so independent. How did I not see this? She whispered, voice broken, searching. Because you have a good heart, I replied, squeezing her hands between mine, feeling the soft warmth and tremor of her fear. Because you believe the best in people. Don't ever let anyone make you think that's a weakness. You deserve someone who honors what you value, not someone who sees your love as a step up his social ladder. Through the alcove's glass partition, I could see Jasper still at our table, phone in hand, laughing softly at something I couldn't hear. Body language relaxed, confident, unaware of the tension he'd created. Every gesture spoke of triumph, of privilege, of belief that he'd already won. I keep thinking about the way he talked about our neighborhood. Vivian said slowly, like it was something embarrassing instead of home. Your mother and I chose that neighborhood because it was full of good people who looked out for each other. I grew up surrounded by teachers and firefighters and shop owners who knew my name and watched me grow up. That's not something to be ashamed of. I know, she whispered, voice uncertain, but do you? Because the way he talked tonight, you'd think honest work was something to hide, like the hands that built my treehouse or taught me to ride a bike were somehow shameful. Her eyes drifted back to Jasper, who had finished his call and was now checking his watch with obvious impatience. A subtle reminder that the world outside our alcove was oblivious, that privilege moved at its own pace. He's probably wondering what's taking so long. She muttered, let him wonder, I said, voice low. Steady, though part of me burned to march back to that table and explain a few things about respect. This conversation is about you, not him. What should I do? Dad, the question hung between us, heavy, filled with both hope and fear. The very question I'd feared and longed to hear at once. I thought of Maria, her advice, her wisdom, and the legacy of love. She left in our family. Only you can decide that, princess, I said, pulling her hands closer. But whatever you choose, I'll be here. And if you ever need a safe place to land, our doors are always open. She nodded, fresh tears spilling over, shimmering like tiny crystals in the candlelight. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart, I whispered, feeling every year, every struggle, every sacrifice tighten around my heart, more than you'll ever know. She stood slowly, straightening her dress, composing herself, carrying the strength and grace I had raised in her. I should go back. He'll want to leave soon. I rose as well, fighting the urge to pull her into my arms and carry her home, like I had when she was small, when the world had hurt her feelings. Just remember what we talked about, okay, I said, and trust your instincts. They're better than you think. Her eyes met mine, determination rising among the tears. The candlelight danced across her face like fire and resolve. In that moment, I knew she would remember. She would choose wisely, and I would always be there, silent but vigilant, watching over her heart. We walked back toward the main dining room together, her hand resting lightly on my arm, a gesture of trust, comfort, and silent reassurance. Outside, the taxi pulled away from the Golden Fork Manhattan's glittering facade receding behind us, its crystal windows and neon hints fading into the foggy winter night. I slumped against the worn vinyl seat, feeling every one of my 58 years settle into my bones. Like ice crawling up from the pavement, the driver's radio played soft jazz, a lonely, mournful counterpoint to the city's eternal symphony of car horns, sirens, and distant shouts. Through the fogged window, I watched Manhattan transform before me. Towering glass monoliths gave way to older brick buildings, their fire escapes and weathered facades a testament to generations of hard work. Designer storefronts surrendered to corner bodegas, laundromats, and the humble entrances of families who knew the value of every dollar. The people on the sidewalks changed too. Power suits and designer heels yielded to work clothes, steel-toed boots and hands calloused from honest labor. My world, the world Jasper had spent the evening mocking. My hand found the gold chain beneath my shirt, fingers closing around the warm metal of Maria's wedding ring. 28 years since I had slipped it onto her finger. 18 since I took it off for the last time. The promise I made at her bedside echoed in the taxi's quiet, shivering space. Take care of our girl, Gus. Keep her safe from anyone who would hurt her. I thought I understood what that meant, then scraped knees, teenage heartbreaks. Maybe some college boy who didn't appreciate her worth. I never imagined someone like Jasper, someone who could slice her self-worth into ribbons, while smiling and calling it love. The Brooklyn Bridge stretched ahead, its cables catching the streetlight reflections, like a web of silver threads suspended over the East River. Below, the water flowed dark and endless toward the harbor, where I had first set foot in New York. 40 years ago, fresh out of the service, armed with nothing but hope, determination, and the promise to protect my family. What would you do? Sweetheart, I whispered to the window, watching Maria's face form in the condensation. Her eyes flickering across the glass, like ghosts of wisdom past. How do I protect her without losing her? I knew what she would say. Maria had never tolerated bullies, whether they wore expensive suits or torn jeans. I remembered when Vivian was 8 and Tommy Morrison kept pulling her braids at school. Maria had marched to that playground, standing tall in the winter wind, and gave Tommy a lecture about respect that left him wide-eyed and apologetic. Not through threats or intimidation, but through the simple, unyielding power of moral authority. The taxi turned off the bridge into familiar territory. Brownstone apartments with fire escapes zigzagging down their weathered faces, small front yards where families grew tomatoes and roses in equal measure. Mrs. Rodriguez's window glowed warm yellow, her evening tela providing a hum of comfort, a soundtrack to the neighborhood's gentle, settling rhythm. I thought about Vivian's face in that quiet alcove, the way her certainty had cracked when I asked her to really look at Jasper's behavior. She was beginning to see it, the condescension disguised as charm, the control masquerading as care. But seeing and accepting were different things, especially when the heart was invested in a different story. My chest tightened as I replayed the evening's humiliations in my mind, the way Jasper had dismissed our neighborhood as quaint as if the place where I had raised my daughter was a museum, exhibit an obsolete curiosity unworthy of respect. Through the taxi window, the streetlights cast elongated shadows on the pavement, reminding me that this was my Brooklyn, my world built on labor, community, and love. And no amount of glittering glass, no amount of money or social maneuvering could ever change that. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the steely bite of the January air through the slight crack in the window. I whispered to Maria, to Vivian, to myself, I will protect her. I will protect her heart, and I will ensure she never forgets what real love feels like. The calculated cruelty of sliding that check across the table. Played over in my mind like a scene on slow-motion film, every second marked by precision, every gesture designed to cut deeper than the dollars it represented. He knew exactly what it would cost. He knew I would pay it anyway for Vivian's sake. But it was never about money. Not really. It was the message hidden beneath the gesture. The silent decree that I was old, weak, irrelevant, that my values were antiquated, my work meaningless, and my love for my daughter nothing more than an obstacle to be circumvented. "You're wrong about that boy," I whispered to the passing street lights, my voice low, steady, but burning with contained fury. Dead wrong. The taxi slowed, turning onto my street, where trees were just beginning to show the first hints of spring buds, shy green against the bare branches. Porch lights pooled, warmth across the sidewalks, and I could see Mr. Fox across the street setting out his garbage for tomorrow's collection, moving with a quiet, necessary purpose. Normal people living, normal lives building, something solid with their hands and hearts. I'd spent 30 years in this neighborhood, watching children grow up and move away, lending a hand through divorces, job losses, and family celebrations. These were the people Jasper saw as beneath him: teachers, mechanics, shop owners, ordinary folk who measured their worth in relationships, loyalty, and hard work, not bank accounts or branded watches. The wedding ring pressed against my chest, its weight a tangible reminder of promises made and kept. The taxi pulled up to my house, and through the front window, I could see the living room where I had taught Vivian to tie her shoes, where we'd watch Saturday morning cartoons, built blanket forts that covered half the furniture, and shared the quiet triumphs of everyday life, where Maria and I had dreamed of the future, and where I had raised our daughter alone. When that future had been shattered. "I promised you I'd keep her safe," I murmured to the empty seat beside me, my fingers clutching the chain beneath my shirt. "That boy is dangerous, Maria. Not with fists or weapons, but something worse. He wants to own her, not love her." The meter clicked off, and I handed the driver cash, enough to tip him generously enough to ensure he got home to his own family safely. As he pulled away, I remained on the sidewalk, looking up at the house that had sheltered 3 generations of honest living. Tomorrow I would call Vivian. We would talk, really talk about what she'd seen tonight, about the subtle cruelty, about what it meant for her future. I wouldn't try to control her choice, but I would make sure she understood what she was choosing. And if Jasper decided to escalate this war, he'd start it. Well, he'd learned that underestimating a man because of his work clothes was a mistake that carried consequences. I climbed the front steps slowly, each footfall heavy, turning the key in the lock of the door that had always been open to anyone needing shelter, wisdom, a hot meal, or just someone who would listen. Inside the house, waited quietly, bathed in the soft glow of memory, every shadow holding laughter, tears, and the promise of whatever came next. 6 weeks passed since that disastrous dinner, 6 weeks of tense phone calls, careful conversations, and quiet observation. Vivian had been asking questions about respect, about relationships, about the fine line between love and possession. Each question, each moment of reflection made Jasper more agitated, more desperate to regain control. Then one winter evening, the sound cut through the quiet, Brooklyn night like a threat, the purr and roar of an expensive engine, followed by a car door slamming with unnecessary force. I looked through my front window and saw him. Jasper striding up the walkway, his expensive coat whipping behind him like a battle flag, every step radiating privilege, arrogance, and the confidence of a man who believed the world owed him compliance. And I knew in that moment that the real confrontation, the one that would test boundaries, love, and loyalty, was only just beginning. He didn't knock. He didn't even wait for an invitation. He pounded on the door like a man who believed the world owed him. Entry, and when I opened it, he was there, standing on my porch, his polished veneer cracked, ugly, barely holding together. Without a word, without a gesture of respect, he pushed past me into the living room, eyes scanning my modest furniture, my family photos, my life with open disdain. We need to talk, he said, spinning to face me like a predator, circling prey. Now. I closed the door behind him, deliberately, leaving it unlocked. About what I asked calmly, don't play dumb with me. He snapped, a voice sharp, aggressive. Vivian's been different since that dinner. She's asking questions, having doubts. I know you've been poisoning her mind against me. Have I? I kept my tone level, watching him pace like a caged animal fuming through my living room. What exactly do you think I told her? He demanded, stopping abruptly, hands clenched at his sides. You told her I was disrespectful, that I don't value family. You made her question everything about our relationship. I told her what I observed. Nothing more, nothing less. His laugh cut the air, harsh, brittle like broken glass. Right. The concerned father act, very touching. He stepped closer, using his height to intimidate, leaning in like he expected fear to shrink me. But here's what you're going to do, he said, voice low, threatening. You're going to call her tomorrow, apologize, tell her you were wrong about me, that you overreacted, and what the words hung between us, heavy as steel. His face flushed, the mask of polished arrogance slipping just slightly. Or you'll find out what it's like to lose access to your daughter permanently. I studied him, the entitled rage, the desperation hiding beneath the bluster. This was a man who'd never been told no, never faced real resistance. In his world, money solved problems. Status bought compliance. Young man, I said quietly, calm but cold. I think you're forgetting yourself. Am I? He snapped, pulling out his phone, waving it like a weapon. One call to Vivian. Right now. I tell her you're threatening me, trying to break us up out of jealousy. Who do you think she'll believe, her loving fiancé or her bitter, lonely father? Is that really how you want to play this? Something in my tone made him pause for the first time since he'd barged through my door. Uncertainty flickered across his face. I stood still, hands, relaxed, chest open, but there was a weight to my presence that made him take a half step back. You don't understand, he said, voice rising. I've worked too hard to get where I am. I won't let some old mechanic ruin everything I've built. And what exactly have you built? I asked, motioning to the modest living room around us. Success, money, a future. He gestured wildly as if that justified his arrogance. Things you wouldn't understand. Real achievement. Not just this. This, I said, indicating the photos on the mantelpiece. Vivian at 5:10:15, laughing, falling, learning. This is a daughter who knows she's loved unconditionally. 26 years of bedtime stories, scraped knees, homework, help. This is what actual achievement looks like. He snorted, but his voice had lost its edge. Sentimental garbage. The world doesn't run on bedtime stories, old man. It runs on power, money, and knowing how to use both. Maybe your world, as I said, stepping slightly between him and the inner rooms of my home. But Vivian comes from a different world. One where character matters more than bank accounts. Sweat purled on his forehead. Despite the cool evening, his expensive shirt clinging to skin, she'll choose me. When it comes down to it, she'll choose the life I can give her over whatever this represents. Will she? I asked mildly. Calm, unshakable. Because from what I've seen lately, she's starting to understand the difference between being provided for and being valued. His body tensed, hands curled into fists. For a split second, I thought he might strike, but something, perhaps the stillness in my stance, perhaps the recognition that he was out of his depth, made him check himself. This isn't over, he said, turning toward the door, but the words carried no conviction. Vivian's not property, son. I called after him, voice even resolute. She doesn't belong to anyone. He paused, hand on the doorknob, then turned back one more time, eyes flickering between defiance and something that might have been unease. You have no idea who you're dealing with, he had spat, voice like a whip cracking through my living room. Actually, I said quietly, almost to myself, I think I have a pretty good idea. After he left, I stood in the dim glow of my living room, listening to his car roar into the night tires, skimming the asphalt engine, growling like some predator, fading into darkness. Through the thin walls, I heard Mrs. Rodriguez's television, murmuring its familiar soap opera hum, the Johnsons' dog barking at some imagined intruder in their yard. Normal sounds, the sounds of ordinary lives, grounding and unremarkable, but to me the world had tilted on its axis. Nothing felt normal anymore. I picked up the phone to call Vivian, then set it down, my fingers lingering over the dial. No, this had to happen face to face. There were things that had to be seen, heard, felt. Words alone would never carry the gravity. The next afternoon, I stood outside her Manhattan apartment building. The sun glinted off glass and steel, reflecting the relentless pulse of the city. In my hands, I clutched a small bouquet of daisies, her mother's favorite flowers, delicate, bright, a fragile reminder of love and protection. My knuckles were white around the stems, fingers hardened from years of honest labor. The doorman looked at me with recognition, a subtle nod of respect. "Send him up," Vivian's voice called through the intercom, warm, cautious, tinged with the shadow of recent turmoil. The elevator ride gave me time to prepare to steel myself. How do you tell your daughter that the man she loves came into your home threatening you? How do you balance honesty with the need to let her make her own choices? The city blurred past in flickering reflections of neon and glass, 1,000 lives passing by, oblivious to the small storm about to unfold inside apartment 15B. She opened the door before I could knock. My heart constricted. She looked tired, dark circles etched beneath her eyes, the brightness of her usual smile dimmed. Forced. "Dad," she said softly, stepping aside. "What brings you here?" "These are for you," I said, holding out the daisies. Her eyes softened as she recognized them, a ghost of a smile breaking through her fatigue. And I wanted to talk. Her apartment was a testament to her talent. Clean lines, precise geometry, muted tones. But it felt sterile. Beautiful, but cold. Expensive furniture created distance instead of warmth. Elegance instead of comfort. She disappeared into the kitchen. "Let me put these in water." "Coffee?" I asked. "That would be nice, Princess." When she returned carrying 2 steaming mugs, we settled on her sofa. Beautiful, yes. But unlike the worn familiar couch of our family home, it didn't cradle or comfort. She tucked her legs beneath her like she used to as a child, and for a fleeting moment I saw my little girl again, the one who had crawled into my lap when the world felt too big, too loud. "I want you to know," I began carefully, "that whatever happens between you and Jasper, I love you completely. Your happiness is the most important thing to me." She nodded, eyes wary, but I could see the tension coiled behind her gaze. "I also need you to know that Jasper came to see me last night." Her mug froze halfway to her lips. He was angry," I said calmly, though my chest still thrummed from the confrontation. "Said you'd been asking questions, having doubts. He wanted me to call you and apologize, tell you I was wrong about him." I kept my voice steady, factual. "When I refused, he made threats about cutting off my access to you." Vivian set down her mug, hands trembling. I can't believe I knew he was upset, but to go to your house. How did he act when he came home?" She was quiet for a long, shivering moment, staring into her coffee, a storm of anger and fear brewing behind her eyes. "He said he'd had a difficult day at work, but now that I think about it," her voice faltered, uncertainty creeping in like shadows at dusk. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I never thought he would." "You have nothing to apologize for," I said, leaning forward, covering her hands with mine. "But I am worried about you. The way he spoke about you last night. Like you were something he owned, not someone he loved." Tears began to gather in her eyes, slipping silently down her cheeks. My heart ached, a cold, piercing weight. I had protected her from scraped knees, from heartbreak, from the small cruelties of childhood. But this was different. This was calculated, cold, predatory. I squeezed her hands gently. "You're not alone, Princess. Whatever happens, you have people who love you for exactly who you are." Her lips quivered. "But I love him." "I know," I whispered, voice breaking slightly. "And he says he loves you. But love isn't enough if it's the wrong kind. Not when it comes wrapped in control and possession instead of care and respect." She blinked rapidly, trying to stem the tears. I thought I could see through it. I thought I knew him." "You do now," I said softly. "And that knowledge is power. Hold on to it. Trust yourself. Trust what your heart tells you. It's stronger than you realize. Through the glass of her sleek apartment, I could see the city carrying on, people rushing to meetings, taxis cutting through streets, neon signs flickering. But inside this room, time slowed, charged with fear, love, and resolve. Tonight I would not fail her. Tonight I would make sure she saw clearly the difference between someone who loves her and someone who seeks to own her. I've been thinking about what you said at the restaurant, I whispered, voice low, almost drowned by the hum of the city outside her apartment window. About respect, about how people treat what you value. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, a trembling gesture that betrayed the war inside her. He's never talked about our neighborhood the way he did that night. Never made me feel ashamed of where I came from. And how do you feel about that? I asked, careful not to rush her. Confused, hurt. She pulled her hands free from mine, hugging herself as if to gather courage from within. I love him, Dad. I really do. But the man I fell in love with wouldn't threaten my father. He wouldn't try to cut me off from my family. I let that sink in, letting silence stretch between us. Then gently I said, people don't usually start with the big controlling behaviors. They start small, criticizing your friends, making you feel guilty for spending time with family, making you question your own judgment. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks, now hot and unrelenting. He has been doing that, she admitted. Little comments about my choices, about how I should dress for his work functions, about how my friends aren't sophisticated enough. I nodded, leaning closer, wrapping my arms around her the way I had when she was small and the world felt impossibly large and heavy. How did I not see it? She whispered almost to herself. Because you loved him, I said softly. Because you wanted to believe the best in him. And that isn't a weakness, sweetheart. That's who you are. Someone who believes in people. Someone who sees their potential. She pressed into me, voice trembling. But what if I'm making a mistake? What if I'm throwing away something good because I'm scared? I thought of Maria, of the promise I had whispered to her all those years ago to protect our daughter from anyone who would hurt her. I thought of scraped knees, broken hearts, the kind of wounds the world leaves behind. But protection sometimes meant stepping back, letting her find her own strength. Only you can answer that, I told her, voice steady, carrying the weight of every experience I had endured. But I can tell you this, I continued, my hand holding hers tight. A man who truly loves you would never try to separate you from the people who matter to you. Love doesn't make demands like that. She cried quietly against my shoulder, and the afternoon sunlight spilled through her windows, painting gold across the designer furniture that suddenly seemed irrelevant, sterile, compared to the simple, unbreakable bond of a father comforting his daughter. I don't know what to do, she whispered, voice small. You don't have to decide everything today, I said, drawing her gaze to meet mine. But remember this, whatever you choose, I'll be here. Our door is always open, and our love for you never changes. She pulled back, her eyes red, but clearer than they'd been in weeks. I love you too, Dad. So much. I know, Princess, I said, voice catching with unspent emotion. I know. We sat together as sunlight faded, the world narrowing to the room around us, father and daughter rebuilding on the foundation of honesty and unconditional love. Whatever came next, we would face it together. Weeks later, April sunshine filtered through flowering trees in a manicured garden, dappled light falling across rows of pristine white chairs. I stood at the edge of the reception area, tugging at my jacket, the same navy suit I had bought for Vivian's college graduation, now feeling woefully inadequate among the sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Guests mingled in clusters, champagne glasses catching the sunlight like scattered diamonds. I recognized only a few of Vivian's college friends offering polite waves. Everyone else belonged to Jasper's world, sleek haircuts, expensive watches, murmurs of stock portfolios, European vacations, and names that meant nothing to me. The ceremony itself had been beautiful. Vivian glowed in her mother's wedding dress, the lace Maria had chosen 40 years ago, transformed to honor past and present. I had stood with pride when the minister asked, "Who gives this woman?" But pride did not quiet the knot in my stomach. The reception would be a battlefield disguised as celebration. "Excuse me, sir," a young photographer said, approaching with a polite yet insistent air. "Could you step aside? We're trying to get family photos. I moved back watching Jasper pose with his groomsmen, his smile sharp as a blade when he noticed me retreating. This was his domain now, and every gesture told me I was merely an inconvenience, a necessary shadow he had to tolerate. Dad. Vivian appeared at my elbow, radiant even in the tension I could see flicker in her eyes. Come meet Jasper's college friends. But as we approached, Jasper materialized with effortless control, the world bending to his performance. Sweetheart, the photographer needs you for a few more shots, he said smoothly, as if guiding her back into his carefully constructed narrative. I watched silent and steady, letting her move forward while I remained in the background, a quiet sentinel. This world of champagne and designer labels might have been his playground, but I knew the truth: he could never truly touch the foundation of love, sacrifice, and trust that had built Vivian into the woman she was today. Your father can introduce himself, Jasper said smoothly, the faintest trace of command curling at the edges of his tone. Vivian hesitated, glancing between us like a tightrope walker, measuring distance over a yawning chasm. But I could see the tension in her shoulders, the flicker of frustration she tried to mask. She started. Trust me, he interrupted, hand pressing possessively against the small of her back, guiding her forward. We'll have plenty of time for mixing later. Before she could protest, he steered her away, and I was left adrift among strangers, a lone island in the glittering sea of Jasper's carefully curated world. I wandered slowly, eyes scanning the reception tables, reading the place cards, as if they might offer me a lifeline. There it was. Table 12, far from the wedding party, sandwiched between Vivian's elderly great-aunt and a couple I didn't recognize. The message was clear. Family present, but barely. You must be Vivian's father, a woman in pearls said, extending her manicured hand. Her smile was practiced, poised, but there was a weight to it, a subtle edge that suggested the stories she'd heard about me had not been flattering. All good things, I hope, I said evenly. Her laugh tinkled like wind chimes caught in a sudden storm. Oh, you know how Jasper is so clever with his observations about people. Around us, the reception flowed like choreographed theater. Waiters glided between tables with silver trays, wine glasses refilled before they even emptied conversations, humming with the effortless confidence of money talking to money. I found my seat and greeted my table mates, Aunt Ruth, squeezing my hand with genuine warmth, and the Hendersons, pleasant folks who had known Vivian since she was a child. For a moment, surrounded by actual family and real connection, I let myself breathe. Then I saw him. Jasper. Moving through the crowd with a predator's grace, his smile sharpened, eyes calculating. Mr. Reyes, he said, voice honeyed but edged with ice. How are you finding everything up to your standards? The words landed like a dagger wrapped in velvet. Conversation faltered as nearby diners sensed the tension, subtle but deadly. Everything's beautiful, I replied carefully. You and Vivian have done a wonderful job. Well, he said, voice casual. Vivian had very specific ideas about elegance. I think we've achieved something quite sophisticated. His gaze swept the lavish hall, landing finally on me. Though I suppose this is all quite different from what you're used to. Aunt Ruth's fingers tightened on her napkin. The Hendersons exchanged uneasy glances. I kept my tone even. Different can be good. Oh, absolutely, Jasper said, leaning closer. Variety is the spice of life. I was just telling some colleagues earlier about the diverse backgrounds represented here today. Really fascinating sociology. I lowered myself toward my chair, hands bracing the armrests, when suddenly a sharp, deliberate tug. The chair jerked backward just as my weight committed to it. I crashed to the polished floor, the air knocked from my lungs, jacket tearing at the shoulder seam, every muscle screaming. Heads turned. Silence fell like a heavy velvet curtain. Oops, Jasper said, voice carrying across the stunned quiet. Looks like someone's getting a bit unsteady on their feet. Age catches up to all of us eventually. But his eyes blazed with triumph. In that moment, the mask slipped. Maybe you'd be more comfortable closer to ground level anyway. Your place is on the floor. Gasps rippled across nearby tables. Aunt Ruth half rose, horror etched deep into her weathered features. The Hendersons stared, mouths open, eyes wide, shock at a violation of every principle of basic decency laid bare for all to witness. And then I heard it, Vivian's cry. a sound that cut through the silver glass symmetry of the reception like lightning through calm skies. Her ballet fell forgotten, her body moving with desperate urgency as she rushed toward me. I lay there for a heartbeat, every one of my 58 years, pressing down on me, surrounded by the silence of 100 people who had just witnessed deliberate cruelty disguised as accident. I could feel the weight of the humiliation, a slow burning fire behind my eyes, but beneath it a sharper, colder truth settled in. This was Jasper. This was the man trying to dismantle everything I had built to make my love for my daughter seem irrelevant. And yet somewhere under the shock, under the hurt, a clarity emerged. I would rise. I would protect her. I would remind him and everyone watching that nothing he could orchestrate would ever break the bond between a father and his daughter. Through the flowering trees, spring sunlight filtered down in lazy shafts, dappling the reception tables with cheerful golden light, blissfully indifferent to the ugly scene unfolding beneath it. Guests murmured and sipped champagne, oblivious to the tension that hung like a storm cloud just feet away. Behind me, the rustle of expensive fabric announced the late arrivals. "Nancy, hurry. We're already so late," a familiar voice called, smooth yet carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed without question. Through the garden's main archway stepped a distinguished couple, slightly winded from travel, yet carrying themselves with a presence that immediately drew attention. The man moved with a military bearing that could not be disguised even in civilian clothes. His eyes scanned the reception like trained optics, taking in every detail, the awkward silence at nearby tables, the scattered conversations, the guests glancing toward the floor where a man was struggling to rise. "Soul, there you are." A woman's voice whispered relief and anxiety mingling in her tone. Nancy, trailing slightly behind, had clearly been worried about travel delays, but the man's attention was locked entirely on the figure in front of him. Me dusting off a torn jacket, trying to regain composure. Even from a distance, his posture triggered something deep within me, buried under decades of reflexes honed in desert bivouacs and midnight patrols. "It can't be," he muttered under his breath, stepping away from Nancy without explanation, boots striking the marble floor with deliberate force. Even in dress shoes, the authority of the stride was unmistakable. I looked up and froze. Gray streaked his temples, lines etched by years and experience. But the eyes, those eyes, were the same sharp, unwavering, intelligent. "Soul hail, soldier hail," a name that carried weight memories of fire sand and nights spent on watch under a blanket of stars. Saul then whispered before I could stop it. Recognition blossomed in his face, slow and devastating. Gratitude deeper than words anchored in shared experience, and survival radiated from him like a beacon. "Sergeant Reyes," he said, voice catching slightly. I can't believe. What are you doing here?" Guests leaned closer, sensing drama, the air humming with tension, yet oblivious to its origin. Jasper froze, his smug triumph curdling into confusion, his predator's composure unraveling as he watched a man approach the very father he had just humiliated. The shift in the room was palpable. A predator confronted by authority earned the hard way. "This is my daughter's wedding," I said quietly, the words low but steady, as Vivian watched from across the room, her eyes wide with awe and disbelief. Soul's gaze widened as recognition and understanding collided. He looked at Jasper, who faltered under the sudden, unspoken judgment. Then his eyes swung back to me, comprehension settling like artillery fire in a bunker, decades of experience, trust and honor coalescing into the realization of what had been set in motion. "Your daughter," he began, voice rising, carrying across the reception with the projection of a man trained to command troops in combat zones. "Your daughter deserves better than this." Heads turned. Conversation stuttered. Jasper's carefully constructed world, the polished smile, the social dominance, the calculated cruelty began to crack under the weight of the combined presence of two men forged in discipline, honor, and real-world stakes. Vivian's eyes darted between us, awe and relief mingling the tension in her shoulders, loosening for the first time that evening. And in that instant, the reception's sparkling chandeliers and dappled sunlight became witnesses to something far older, far deeper than wealth or pretense, the return of integrity, courage, and a father's unbreakable bond with his daughter. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need everyone to understand something." The authority in Soul's voice was immediate and absolute. Conversations died mid-sentence. Waiters froze mid-step silver trays suspended in the air. Even the string quartet seemed to lower their bows, the soft notes of Vivaldi cut off by the weight of his presence. Every eye in the sun-dappled reception turned toward him. This man's soul continued, his hand falling gently yet reverently on my shoulder, is Sergeant Gus Reyes, United States Army. A hush rippled across the crowd, disbelief threading through the murmurs. Nancy, standing beside him, drew a sharp breath. She had heard fragments of this story countless times, hints of heroism whispered over late-night coffees and reunions, but she had never expected to meet the man who had saved her husband's life. Her eyes glistened, understanding and awe mingling in the soft spring light. April 2003, Soul's voice dropped, steady yet heavy with memory. Forward Operating Base Charlie, Iraq. During a night patrol, insurgents overran our position. Gus was wounded, trapped under enemy fire. Gas spread like wildfire. Guest turned toward me, eyes widening in shock, processing this new context. The man who had stumbled earlier, who had been humiliated by Jasper's calculated cruelty, was no ordinary working-class guest. He was a hero forged in fire, baptized in courage, scarred by battle, yet unbowed. He carried me 300 yards through active gunfire to the evacuation point. Soul continued, voice thick with pride and emotion. Any reasonable person would have sought cover, but not him. I recommended him for the Silver Star, for valor under fire, for saving the life of a fellow soldier when the cost could have been his own. Whispers erupted through the crowd. Guests craned their necks, processing what they had just heard. Jasper's face drained of color, pale as desert sand, his perfectly maintained mask of entitlement slipping in real time. The man he had tormented for sport, the one he assumed was weak, ordinary, inconsequential, was a decorated war hero. Courage, honor, and real-world bravery existed in this man's veins in ways Jasper could never fathom. He never told me, Vivian whispered, voice small, but cutting through the stunned silence. Tears streaked her cheeks as she looked at me anew, her eyes wide with wonder. Dad, you never said anything about, I just did my job. Sue, I interrupted, softly, uncomfortable with the spotlight, yet steady. Any soldier would have done the same thing. No, sir. Not any soldier. Soul's voice cracked, carrying across the sunlit reception like a cannon's roar. He saved my life, so I could come home to Nancy, so I could watch my son grow up, so I could walk him down this very aisle today. He turned toward Jasper. The man's face, once full of smug confidence, now twisted into horror and disbelief. Every ounce of entitlement, every carefully curated sense of social superiority crumbled under the weight of truth. This man is the reason I have a family soul, declared, voice rising with righteous intensity, carrying across the silent reception. He is a genuine American hero, and anyone who would treat him with anything less than complete respect, they will understand the cost of their arrogance today. The room was a tableau of shock and awe. Wine glasses remained untouched. Conversations faltered mid-word. Guests who had earlier whispered about etiquette or decoration now leaned in, riveted by the revelation. The man in the torn jacket, dusted with remnants of an earlier fall, stood unassuming, yet monumental, a living testament to courage, honor, and sacrifice. Vivian, standing beside me, squeezed my hand tightly, her grip fierce with pride and love. Her eyes shimmered with tears of understanding, a daughter finally seeing her father, not just as a parent, but as a man who had faced real danger, real darkness, and survived with his integrity intact. And in that moment, Jasper's carefully constructed world, the wealth, the dominance, the pretense of control, was shattered. The true power in the room was no longer measured in money or charm. It was measured in courage, sacrifice, and the quiet, unshakable authority of a man who had earned the right to command respect, not through status, but through valor. Welcome home, Sergeant Soul, said, his tone crisp and formal, yet threaded with reverence. He snapped to attention, the practiced motion of a soldier honoring a commander, one final time, even here in a garden filled with champagne flutes and silk gowns. The moment hung in the air, taut as a drawn bow. Every guest froze mid-conversation, some mid-step, others mid-sip, sensing the gravity without knowing the full story. Jasper stepped forward, face ashen and pale. The predator who had spent months orchestrating humiliation, replaced by a young man facing the wreckage of his own character. His hands trembled slightly as he approached the microphone, still perched awkwardly at the corner of the reception stage abandoned by the band earlier. I, his voice cracked like thin ice. He cleared his throat, swallowing hard, trying again. I need to address everyone here. Guests shifted uneasily in their chairs, eyes darting between the trembling man at the mic and the war hero beside me. Vivian's hand gripped my arm tightly, nails digging into my sleeve, her body taut with apprehension. What happened here tonight? What I did was inexcusable. The words carried echoing across the marble and gardens, amplified by the soft acoustics of the reception space. Jasper swallowed, eyes scanning the crowd as if drawing courage from the sheer impossibility of what he had to say. I've spent months treating this man with disrespect and contempt. He continued, voice breaking, but growing steadier with each syllable. And I just learned why that makes me not just wrong, but despicable. Nancy Hale covered her mouth with trembling hands, her eyes wide as she recognized the weight of her son's confession. Sol stood rigid, military posture, intact, silently waiting to see if the boy he had raised could find the courage to truly atone. My father just told you that Sergeant Reyes saved his life in Iraq, Jasper said, voice stronger now. What he didn't tell you is that for months, I treated this war hero like he was beneath me. Because he's a mechanic, because he lives in Brooklyn instead of Manhattan, because I was too insecure, too small, too blinded by my own arrogance to see past my prejudices. A ripple of whispered astonishment ran through table 6, where older guests exchanged glances. Some were stunned, some incredulous, but all were drawn in by the raw public dismantling of a carefully constructed facade. I pulled his chair away and watched him fall. I told him his place was on the floor. I forced him to pay for a dinner he couldn't afford just to watch him struggle. I made fun of his neighborhood, his work, his values. I humiliated him. Gasps swept through the reception. The photographer's finger hovered over the shutter, uncertain whether to document a breakdown or a reckoning. And why did I do this? Jasper's voice trembled, the first true vulnerability in a lifetime of performance. Because I was afraid. Afraid I'd never measure up to my father's courage. Afraid Vivian would see that I am not half the man either of them is. So I tried to tear down someone who deserved only honor and respect. He turned directly toward me, abandoning the microphone, speaking from the heart unguarded. Mr. Reyes, Sergeant Reyes, I am profoundly sorry. You saved my father's life, and I repaid that debt by trying to humiliate you in front of my wife-to-be. I don't expect forgiveness, but I am asking for the chance to earn it. Silence descended like a velvet curtain. Even the waitstaff froze, trays, mid-air, glasses still full. Every eye was on the man who had once been the architect of cruelty, now stripped bare before the assembled witnesses of wealth and power. I want to learn from your example, Jasper said, tears tracking down his cheeks. I want to become the kind of man who deserves to be part of your family. The kind of man who protects and honors what matters instead of attacking it out of fear. Vivian's tears fell freely as she watched him confess, watched the walls he had built crumble in front of her. Nancy reached for her husband's arm, and together they observed their son simultaneously broken and brave, atoning for months of shameful behavior. I stepped forward, feeling the weight of Maria's ring against my chest, feeling the quiet promise I had made decades ago to protect our daughter. Sometimes I realized protection meant teaching others how to love her properly. Son, I said, my voice cutting through the hush, steady and calm. It takes more courage to admit mistakes publicly than it does in private. What matters now is not what you did, but what you choose to do going forward. Relief washed over Jasper's face. I extended my hand. He took it trembling, and I pulled him into an embrace earned not by blood or duty, but by honesty, courage, and a willingness to confront himself. Family, I whispered, so only he could hear, means supporting each other through everything, the good times and the times when we fall short of who we want to be. Welcome to our family, and thank you for loving my daughter enough to become worthy of her. Sol's eyes softened, the father's pride and relief shining through years of military discipline. I'm proud of you, Jasper, he said quietly, voice strong yet tender. This is the man I raised, the one I always knew was in there. Nancy stepped forward, wrapping both Vivian and me in a warm, tearful embrace. I'm so sorry for what you endured tonight, but I am grateful. Grateful my son found the courage to make it right. The photographer, uncertain for a heartbeat, raised his camera, capturing not just a moment, but a transformation. The unmasking of arrogance, the rebirth of integrity, and the triumph of honor over entitlement. Vivian's arm found mine, her hand gripping mine tight, pulling me into the circle of family renewed and redeemed. Yes, she said firmly, her voice unwavering. Document this, every second of it. The moment our family truly began was quiet at first, almost imperceptible, like the first notes of a symphony stirring in the distance. Then gradually, the applause started soft, tentative, a few claps breaking the hush, and swelled into a crescendo that carried across the garden, through the flowering trees and into every heart present. In that sound, I felt Maria's presence as vividly as if she were standing beside me, her hand warm on my shoulder, whispering pride and reassurance. Our daughter had chosen well, not the man Jasper had been, but the man he was becoming, tempered by humility, courage, and the capacity to honor what truly mattered. The weight of past missteps melted away in the glow of this revelation, leaving only hope and renewal. The band resumed its music, a gentle waltz weaving through the evening air. Couples moved toward the dance floor, laughter rippling like sunlight over the petals of spring blossoms. Lanterns swung in the soft breeze, casting golden pools of light over faces bright with joy, while the gardens themselves seemed to sway in quiet celebration, every flowering tree echoing the eternal song of growth, redemption, and second chances. Vivian's hand found Jasper's, and for the first time that evening, the tension of months, the weight of lessons learned, and the trials of character melted into a simple, unspoken understanding. Around us, friends and family danced, but in that moment, time slowed, and I felt the promise of the future, the life they would build together, strong and kind, a reflection of the love that had carried us through every storm. And as the sun dipped lower, casting its last golden rays across the gardens, I knew that this night, this choice, this family was real. The past had shaped us, the lessons had been learned, and love, resilient, patient, and true, would carry us forward. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.